You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote those words while ruling an empire in the midst of a devastating plague. 2,000 years later, we face our own waves of crisis and uncertainty. This is the story of how Stoicism provided a framework for survival, not just for individuals, but for entire societies teetering on the brink. By the end of this journey, you will possess a timeless blueprint for building unshakable resilience in your own life. We will uncover how a Roman emperor managed despair to lead with compassion and explore the mental fortress ordinary people built to withstand chaos. How might your greatest challenge become your most valuable teacher? When a plague sweeps through your city, what can you actually control? This is the exact question the Stoics asked, and their answer became the bedrock of their entire philosophy. It all hinges on a simple yet profound mental separation known as the Dichotomy of Control. The philosopher Epictetus, who began his life as a slave, opens his famous manual, the Enchiridion, with this very idea. He states that some things are up to us and some things are not. Our body, our property, our reputation, and public health are not entirely within our command. They are subject to the unpredictable whims of fortune, to the spread of a virus, or to the actions of others. But our own judgments, our impulses, our desires and aversions, and the character we choose to embody in the face of it all, these are completely and solely up to us. This is not a call to passivity. It is a call to radical clarity. It is about redirecting your finite energy from fighting the storm to steering your own ship. Imagine the streets of ancient Rome during the Antonine Plague. One person frantically hoards food, desperately trying to secure a future they cannot guarantee. This is an attempt to control the uncontrollable, and it breeds only more fear. Another person accepts that food may become scarce, but focuses their effort on what they can control, their own courage, their fairness in sharing what they have, and their compassion toward their suffering neighbors. This is the Stoic shift. It transforms a victim of circumstances into an architect of their own character. The plague itself was not a choice, but how one responded to it. That was the ultimate test of a person's philosophy. So consider a challenge you are facing right now. What one aspect of it are you exhausting yourself trying to control that is, in truth, ultimately beyond your power? The Antonine Plague claimed the lives of millions, sweeping through the Roman Empire and decimating its legions. At the helm of this crisis stood an emperor, Marcus Aurelius, a man who documented his private struggle in a personal journal we now know as Meditations. He wrote not for fame, but for self-governance, and his words reveal a leader applying Stoic principles to the monumental task of ruling a society in collapse. His central focus was the common good, a concept deeply woven into his philosophy. He reminds himself that what brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. This was not a vague ideal, it was a practical compass for his every decision. His personal meditations directly informed public policy, steering him away from the self-preservation instincts of a terrified ruler and toward a leadership of profound compassion. We see this in his reported actions, such as spending imperial funds to provide proper funerals for the poor who had been left in the streets. This was not a grand political maneuver, it was a simple act of virtue, a recognition of shared humanity in the face of a shared threat. He maintained civic order not through fear and force, but by modeling the very resilience and duty he preached. In your own life, within your family, your workplace, or your neighborhood, what does your duty to the common good look like? It may not involve state funerals, but it could be the simple, steadfast commitment to act with integrity and support those around you when challenges arise. What if the greatest challenge of your life was also a necessary part of it? This is the heart of the Stoic practice known as Amor Fati, the love of fate. It is a radical invitation to not just endure the plagues of our existence, but to embrace them as essential threads in the fabric of our lives. This is not a passive surrender, a simple shrugging of the shoulders at misfortune. It is an active, courageous choice to see every event, even the most painful, as fuel for our growth and an integral piece of our story. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that we are afflicted by our opinion of things. He argued that we make our burdens heavier by resisting them. To accept an event willingly is to lighten its load. Imagine a doctor tending to the sick during the height of an ancient plague. They could see their work as a terrible curse, a twist of fate that has placed them in constant danger and surrounded by death. This perspective would drain their spirit and amplify their suffering. Or they could choose to see this very crisis as their purpose. They could embrace their role, understanding that their skills and their courage are most needed precisely here, in this devastating moment. This shift does not change the reality of the plague, but it transforms the doctor's entire experience of it. Their work becomes a manifestation of their virtue, a difficult but meaningful path they are destined to walk. This is Amor Fati in action, turning the lead of catastrophe into the gold of purpose. So think of a recent difficulty you have faced. How would your relationship to that struggle change if you saw it not as an interruption to your life, but as a necessary chapter within it? Marcus Aurelius often pictured the soul as a fortress high on a hill, an inner citadel that remains serene even as chaos rages at its gates. This is more than a poetic image. It is a practical psychological model for building unshakable mental resilience. The walls of this fortress are not made of stone, but of your own disciplined judgment. Its strength comes from your ability to retreat inside and focus solely on what is within your power, your character, your values, and your actions. While a plague sweeps through the city, while rumors fly and fear spreads, the Stoic works to keep the gates of their mind guarded. They understand that the turmoil outside cannot enter unless they grant it permission. This is the core of the practice, a daily training in discernment. You decide what opinions and external events you let shape your inner world. The person who is consumed, refreshing news feeds constantly and absorbing every alarming headline, has left the gates to their citadel wide open. The siege of anxiety and panic pours in unchallenged. In contrast, the person practicing this Stoic discipline might check for necessary information, but then they consciously withdraw. They close the gates and return their attention to the duties of their own character, to their work, to their kindness, and to their courage. This inner retreat is not an escape from reality. It is a strategic choice about where to place your attention and energy. It is how you protect your capacity to act wisely when those around you are reacting from fear. What daily practice could you begin to strengthen the walls of your own inner citadel? It might be a few minutes of quiet reflection each morning, a conscious decision to limit your exposure to stressful media, or simply pausing before you react to a provocation. Every small act of mental discipline adds another stone to your inner fortress. The Stoics had a counterintuitive practice for facing plagues. They actively imagined the worst. This mental exercise, known as Premeditatio Malorum or the Premeditation of Evils, was not a morbid obsession with disaster. It was a disciplined form of psychological inoculation. By visualizing potential losses, illness, or even death in advance, They stripped those events of their power to shock and paralyze when they actually occurred. The goal was to face reality with clear eyes, not to live in fear of it. The philosopher Seneca was a strong proponent of this practice. He advised periodically rehearsing poverty by living on simple food and rough clothing. He even suggested mentally practicing exile and illness. He wrote that we should send ourselves into voluntary exile every so often, not with a change of place, but with a change of mindset. Why would anyone do this? Seneca explains that the person who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. The shock is gone, replaced by a calm recognition. This is the difference between being ambushed by a crisis and being prepared for it. Consider a modern equivalent. Imagine you are concerned about a potential supply shortage. A common reaction is to worry anxiously, checking store shelves daily and feeding a cycle of panic. The Stoic approach would be different. You would sit down and calmly envision the scenario. You would mentally walk through what a shortage would actually mean for your daily life. You would think about the adaptations you could make, the resources you already have, and the inner strength you could call upon. By doing this, you are not inviting the problem, you are disarming it. The anxiety loses its edge because you have already faced the possibility in your mind and found yourself still standing. The event itself, should it happen, becomes a manageable reality rather than a terrifying unknown. So take a quiet moment for a small experiment. Pick a minor worry that has been lingering in your thoughts. It could be a difficult conversation you need to have or a small project at work that might go wrong. Close your eyes and briefly, calmly, imagine that outcome unfolding. See yourself navigating it with patience and reason. Notice how, after this brief rehearsal, the worry feels a little less powerful, a little more like something you can handle. If Stoics are detached from externals, does that mean they are indifferent to the suffering of others? This is one of the most persistent misunderstandings of the entire philosophy. The truth is the exact opposite. Stoicism does not teach a cold, unfeeling heart. It teaches a resilient and purposeful one. The Stoic ideal of apathy, or apatheia, is not about a lack of feeling, but a freedom from the destructive, overwhelming passions that cloud judgment and paralyze action. It is the difference between being swept away by a wave of grief and standing firm in the water to pull others to safety. The virtue of justice and our shared humanity demand that we help others according to our role and capacity. The Stoic philosopher Hierocles beautifully illustrated this with his concept of circles of concern. He asked us to imagine a series of concentric circles. The innermost circle is your own mind, the next contains your immediate family, then your extended family, your local community, your country, and finally the entire human race. The Stoic task, he said, is to continually draw these outer circles inward, to bring the same sense of care and connection you feel for your family to your neighbors, and then to strangers, and ultimately to all of humanity. This is not indifference, it is an active, expanding empathy. Now, picture a Stoic physician working through a long, grim night during the plague. They move from patient to patient, offering comfort, applying treatments, doing everything within their skill to heal. When a patient dies, they do not allow their grief to shatter their composure. They acknowledge the loss, perhaps feel a pang of sorrow for a life ended, but they do not collapse. They take a steadying breath and turn to the next person who needs their help. Their emotional resilience is not a lack of compassion. It is the very thing that makes their compassion effective and sustainable. They can serve precisely because they are not personally devastated by every single outcome which is beyond their control. Their duty is to their art and to the people before them, not to being overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the tragedy. So how can you practice this kind of compassionate action in your own life? The next time you are faced with someone else's distress, a friend in crisis or a stranger in need, pause for a moment. Acknowledge your natural emotional response, but then ask yourself a simple, powerful question. What is the most helpful thing I can do right now? Shift your focus from sharing in the panic to providing a steady hand. Your calm presence and clear action will be a far greater gift than any amount of shared anxiety. In a world turned upside down by plague, what is it you truly desire? Is it a guarantee of perfect health for you and your loved ones, a swift return to the comfortable rhythms of normal life? These are natural wishes, yet the Stoics identified a profound danger within them. When our deepest happiness depends on outcomes we cannot command, we build our house on a foundation of sand. This is why they cultivated a radical discipline of desire, training themselves to want only what is virtuous and firmly within their power. The philosopher Epictetus, who understood powerlessness from his years in slavery, put it with stark clarity. He said that happiness and freedom begin with a precise understanding of this simple rule. Some things are within our power and some are not. Within our power are our own judgments, our impulses, our desires and aversions. He taught that the chief task in life is to guard our own character, and in this we are truly invincible. When a plague ravages society, desiring a specific external outcome, like the complete eradication of the disease, is to set yourself up for despair. That outcome is not yours to command, but desiring to act with courage, to be fair in your dealings, and to show compassion to those who are suffering. These desires are entirely within your grasp. They rely on no one else and on no twist of fate. They provide a stable foundation that no epidemic can shake. Think of two neighbors living through the same outbreak. One desperately desires a return to normal, becoming increasingly bitter and anxious with each passing day that normalcy does not arrive. Their peace is held hostage by an event they cannot control. The other neighbor accepts the reality of the plague and shifts their desire inward. They focus on wanting to be a person of integrity and resourcefulness, right here, right now. They find purpose in checking on the elderly, in sharing supplies, in maintaining their own composure. Their desire is aligned with their nature as a rational, social being, and thus they find a strange and powerful form of contentment even in the midst of chaos. So take a moment to examine a single desire in your own life. What is one thing you want that depends entirely on an external event or another person's action? Now reframe that desire. Instead of wanting that specific outcome, what if your true desire was to handle whatever outcome arises with wisdom, strength, and virtue? How would that subtle shift change your entire experience of waiting? Stoicism teaches that we are not isolated individuals, but parts of a greater whole, a truth magnified during a plague. This foundational idea is known as Oikeiosis, a term that translates to appropriation or familiarization. It describes our innate human impulse to extend our circle of care, starting with our own self-preservation and naturally expanding outward to embrace our family, our neighbors, and ultimately all of humanity. Far from making us weak, this inherent social wiring is the very engine of societal resilience. When a crisis strikes, it does not create this connection, it activates it, revealing the intricate web of mutual dependence that has been there all along. Recognizing this bond is not just a philosophical exercise, it is a profound source of strength and a clear guide for action. It moves us from a narrow focus on personal survival to a powerful stance of communal support. Marcus Aurelius constantly reinforced this in his private writings, reminding himself that we are born for cooperation, like the pairs of feet and hands that work in unison. If feet try to act only for themselves or hands refuse the labor of the body, the entire organism would falter. In the same way, our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the health of the collective body. We see this principle in action throughout history. During the very plagues that challenged Rome, we find records of communities organizing to care for the sick and bury the dead when official systems were overwhelmed. In our modern context, this ancient impulse manifests in the rapid formation of mutual aid groups, where neighbors coordinate to deliver groceries to the vulnerable or share vital information. These are not random acts of charity. They are living expressions of Oikeiosis, the practical recognition that my survival is tied to yours. This week, what is one tangible way you can consciously strengthen your connection to your local or even global community? It could be as simple as introducing yourself to a neighbor you have never met, or volunteering a small amount of your time to a local organization. Every intentional act of connection is a stone laid in the foundation of a more resilient world. The Stoics kept a skull on their desk. During a plague, death was not an abstraction. It was a constant presence in the air, a reality that could not be ignored or sanitized. This practice, known as Memento Mori, which means remember you must die, was not a morbid fixation. It was a profound tool for stripping life down to its essentials. The Stoics understood that the awareness of our own end is the very thing that can teach us how to truly live. It is the final, unavoidable deadline that clarifies what actually matters. When you carry the knowledge that your time is limited, the trivial frustrations that consume so much of your day begin to lose their power over you. The fear of social judgment, the anxiety over minor setbacks, the endless pursuit of status, all of it starts to feel like a distraction from the real work of being human. This practice cultivates a specific kind of courage, the courage to stop postponing your life. Seneca wrote extensively on this in his letters, arguing that it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. He insisted that life is long enough if you know how to use it. The quality of our actions, the depth of our character, and the sincerity of our relationships, these are the measures of a life well lived, not the number of years accumulated. Imagine a person living through a time of plague, aware that any day could be their last. This awareness does not paralyze them with fear. Instead, it propels them into action. They might finally have that difficult but necessary conversation to mend a broken relationship, understanding that there may be no tomorrow for apologies. They might stop waiting for the perfect moment and begin that meaningful project they have always put off. They spend their time with people they genuinely care about, doing work that feels significant. Their priorities become starkly clear because the illusion of endless time has been shattered. Take a moment for a simple, powerful exercise. Get a piece of paper and write down your answer to this question. If you knew with certainty that you had 1 year left to live, what would you start doing differently tomorrow? The answer is not about a bucket list of exotic travels. It is about the immediate changes in your behavior, your focus, and your relationships. It reveals the gap between the life you are living and the life you value. Memento Mori is the practice that helps you close that gap starting today. What does courage look like when you cannot eliminate the danger? In Stoicism, courage is never the absence of fear, but the profound judgment to act rightly in spite of it. This is fortitude in its truest form, a quality that becomes essential for anyone leading a community or caring for the sick when a plague descends. The Stoics defined courage as a type of practical wisdom, the clear-sighted knowledge of what is truly worth enduring fear for. And the only thing that meets that standard is virtuous action itself, doing what is right and necessary because it is your duty. The Roman statesman Cato the Younger was celebrated for this. He stood unyieldingly for his principles in the face of political threats and violence, demonstrating that courage is the commitment to integrity, even when the cost is terrifyingly high. This is not fearlessness, it is fear mastered and put into service of a greater good. Consider a nurse during an outbreak walking into a ward full of contagious patients. The fear is real, a natural and understandable reaction to a genuine threat. But their courage is not defined by whether they feel that fear. It is defined by the decision to tie their shoes, put on their uniform, and walk through those hospital doors anyway. They do not act because the danger is gone. They act because their duty to care for the sick is more important than their personal fear. Their action is a direct expression of the virtue of justice, their commitment to the common good. This is Stoic courage in the flesh, a quiet, determined force that holds society together when everything is falling apart. Think back to a moment in your own life when you chose to do something difficult. Perhaps you spoke up for someone who was being treated unfairly, or you began a challenging new path in your career. What was the specific virtue you were upholding in that moment? Was it justice or compassion, or perhaps a commitment to truth? Recognizing the virtue behind your action reveals that your courage was never about being unafraid, but about what you valued more than your fear. When medicine is limited, who gets it? Stoicism provides a framework for this impossible choice. The virtue of justice becomes the essential compass for a society under pressure, guiding how we distribute both aid and burdens when scarcity forces difficult decisions. For the Stoics, justice was not a vague ideal of equality, but the active practice of giving each person their due according to reason and the common good. It requires us to see beyond our immediate circle and recognize the inherent worth of every individual in the community. Marcus Aurelius constantly reinforced this, writing that we are all citizens of the highest city, a single cosmos where all humans are kindred. This perspective demands fair treatment for everyone, not just those we know or those who can pay. In a plague, this philosophical foundation transforms into practical policy. It is the reasoning behind a triage protocol that prioritizes the sickest or those with the best chance of survival, a heartbreaking but reasoned attempt to save the most lives with limited resources. It is the community that organizes a food-sharing system, ensuring the elderly and the isolated receive supplies before the strong and well-connected hoard them. These actions are not just logistics, they are justice in motion. They ask us to suppress our instinct for self-preservation alone and act for the preservation of the whole. Consider a current social inequity you have observed, perhaps in access to education or healthcare. What would a truly just response to that problem look like if it were guided by clear reason and a genuine concern for the common good, rather than by fear or favoritism? The answer to that question is where Stoic philosophy meets the road. In a crisis, the first casualty is often the truth. The Stoics had a practice for that. They called it the discipline of assent, a mental checkpoint between your first impression of an event and your full-blown belief about it. This is the crucial pause that prevents a spark of information from becoming a wildfire of panic. Epictetus taught that we are disturbed not by things but by the views we take of them. A rumor is just a sound, a collection of words. The disturbance comes the moment we grant it our unquestioning belief and let it dictate our emotions and actions. During a plague, this discipline becomes a life-saving skill. Imagine two people hear the same unverified claim about a miracle cure circulating online. The first person, operating on raw impression, immediately shares the post with their entire network, their fear and hope overriding any scrutiny. They have given their full assent to an untested idea, and in doing so, they inadvertently fuel a chain reaction of misinformation. The second person, trained in this Stoic pause, catches the initial surge of hope, but they stop. They ask simple questions. What is the source of this claim? Is there any evidence to support it? What do trusted authorities say? By withholding their immediate judgment, they protect their own peace of mind and prevent themselves from becoming an agent of chaos. Their calm inquiry is an act of public service. Think about a recent news headline or social media post that triggered a strong reaction in you. Can you identify the initial impression it created? Now, with the benefit of a little distance, ask yourself if that first impression was the complete and objective truth, or if it was a story your mind began to tell before all the facts were in. That moment of recognition is the heart of the discipline of Assent. A plague tests our limits. Stoic moderation is the art of living well within them. This virtue, known as temperance, is far more than simple self-denial. It is a profound form of wisdom applied directly to how we use our energy, our attention, and our material goods. When a society is stretched thin by crisis, temperance becomes the quiet engine of endurance, ensuring that vital resources are not squandered in a moment of panic, but are conserved for the long and difficult road ahead. Seneca, who witnessed Rome's excesses, wrote with piercing clarity about this. He observed that it is not the lack of vast riches that causes torment, but our endless desires. It is not the smallness of our means that troubles us, but their failure to match our wants. True poverty, he argued, is not having too little, but wanting too much. This insight redefines scarcity. The real shortage during a plague is not necessarily of food or medicine, but of calm, purposeful judgment. When people hoard out of fear, they are acting on an immoderate desire for security, a desire that can never be fully satisfied and which ultimately leaves the community weaker. The Stoic response is to pare down to what is essential, to distinguish sharply between a genuine need and a passing want. Imagine two households facing the same uncertainty. One family, driven by anxiety, rushes to buy far more than they could possibly use, exhausting their funds and filling their home with goods that may spoil. This initial surge of action gives them a fleeting sense of control, but it leaves them physically drained and financially strained, their resilience brittle. The other family practices temperance. They take stock of what they truly need for the coming weeks. They buy reasonably, they plan their meals carefully, and they conserve their emotional energy by avoiding the frantic buzz of rumor and fear. This moderation is not a sign of weakness, but of immense strength. It leaves them with reserves, both material and mental, that they can then use to support a struggling neighbor or to endure a prolonged period of isolation. Their moderation makes them a source of stability for others, so turn this lens on your own life for a moment. Where could practicing greater moderation actually increase your capacity to endure and to help? Is it in your consumption of news, which can drain your focus? Is it in your daily schedule, where saying no to one less important commitment preserves the energy for what truly matters? Identify one single area. The discipline of living well within your limits is how you build a reserve of strength that no external crisis can easily deplete. Let's take a step back, 1,000 years back, and look at this moment from a cosmic perspective. The Stoics developed a powerful mental exercise for exactly this purpose, known as the view from above. When the weight of a plague felt crushing, they would deliberately shift their perspective to the vast scale of the cosmos. This was not about dismissing real suffering, but about contextualizing it within the grand, flowing tapestry of existence. Marcus Aurelius was a master of this practice. In his private writings, he constantly reminded himself to look at things from above, to see the bustling cities and the farms and the marriages and the funerals as mere brief flashes in the immense span of time. He would contemplate the countless generations that have come before, lived their lives with all their hopes and fears, and then vanished. He saw the entire human drama as a tiny, fleeting part of a much larger, orderly universe. This cosmic zoom out dissolves the illusion that your personal crisis is the center of the world. It shrinks the overwhelming problem down to its true proportion, not to minimize your pain, but to remind you of your place in something magnificent and enduring. Let's try a small version of this right now. Close your eyes for just a moment if you feel comfortable. Picture your own neighborhood from high above, seeing the rooftops and streets as tiny patterns. Now pull your view further back until you see your entire city, then your country, then the whole planet hanging as a pale blue dot in the blackness of space. See the sun, a single star among billions in our galaxy, which is itself one of countless galaxies swirling in the cosmos. From this vantage point, your personal anxieties, the urgent news cycles, the temporary shortages, all of it exists on that tiny, beautiful speck. This perspective does not erase your challenges, but it can drain the panic from them, replacing it with a strange and calming sense of connection. You are part of this vast, ancient, and awe-inspiring whole. The next time a problem threatens to consume you, steal just 30 seconds to perform this mental flight. Look at your struggle from the ceiling of your room, then from the clouds, then from the stars. Notice how the weight of it shifts when you remember you are a citizen of the entire universe. Stoicism is not an ivory tower philosophy. Its value is measured in action during a crisis. While other schools of thought might have debated the ideal forms of justice or courage from the safety of a lecture hall, the Stoics were out in the messy reality of a plague-stricken world, making decisions that determined who lived and who died. For Marcus Aurelius, this meant his philosophical principles had to translate directly into public health policy and economic intervention. He reportedly implemented what we would now recognize as quarantine measures, isolating the sick to slow the spread of the disease. He managed the empire's strained finances to support those who had lost everything. These were not ideologically pure choices, free from compromise. They were difficult, pragmatic actions guided by the core Stoic virtues of wisdom and justice. His duty was to the common good, and that duty demanded he deal with the world as it was, not as he might have wished it to be. This is the essence of the Stoic concept of acting according to nature, which means acting in accordance with both your own rational nature and the nature of the world around you. It means recognizing the practical realities of a situation and responding to them with virtue as your compass. Epictetus taught his students to focus on the duty of the moment, whatever that duty may be. For a doctor, the duty is to heal. For a leader, it is to govern wisely. For a citizen, it is to follow reasonable orders for the safety of all. The principle remains steadfast, but the required action must be fluid, adapting to the specific challenge at hand. Imagine two leaders facing the same outbreak. One is rigidly ideological. They cling to a single solution, perhaps a belief in absolute personal freedom, and refuse to implement any measures that would restrict movement, even as the hospitals overflow. Their commitment is to an abstract idea, not to the living, breathing people they are meant to serve. The other leader is guided by Stoic pragmatism. Their principle is the preservation of human life and social order. To uphold that principle, they might temporarily restrict freedoms, organize supply chains, and change their tactics daily based on the latest evidence. Their flexibility is not a sign of weak conviction, but of profound strength and a deep commitment to their central duty. They are like a tree that bends in a storm so it does not break, its roots, its virtues holding firm while its branches, its actions, adapt to the wind. So reflect on a principle you hold dear. It could be a belief in honesty or self-reliance or community. Now, consider a difficult situation you are currently navigating. How could you apply that principle more pragmatically? If your principle is honesty, does it always mean saying everything you think, or could it mean communicating the truth in a way that is constructive and kind, tailored to the specific person and moment? This is not abandoning your values. It is the sophisticated work of putting them to use in a complex world, making them live and breathe through your adaptable, courageous actions. You don't need to be a perfect Stoic sage to benefit from these teachings, especially now. The ideal of the sage, that flawless being who never errs in judgment and remains perfectly serene in any storm, was a guiding star for the Stoics, not a realistic daily target. The real work, the work that builds resilience, happens in the space of the proficiens, the person who is progressing, who is actively trying. This is the heart of Stoic practice, a commitment to the journey of improvement itself, not the arrival at a state of perfection. When a plague rages and fear is a constant companion, expecting yourself to be an unshakable pillar of virtue at all times is a recipe for self-condemnation. The goal is not to never feel fear or never make a mistake. The goal is to notice when you have stumbled, to learn from it, and to choose more wisely the next time. This is how character is forged, through repeated effort, not through flawless execution. Seneca, one of the most famous Stoics, was remarkably open about his own imperfections in his letters. He writes, "I am not a wise man, and I shall never be." He did not say this in despair, but as a simple acknowledgement of his humanity. He urged his friend Lucilius not to demand perfection from himself, but to value the attempt, the sincere daily effort to live by reason. He observed that we are like a patient in the care of a doctor. We are on the path to health, not already cured. The entire journey is one of convalescence. Imagine a father during the plague, terrified for his family's safety. He hears a rumor of soldiers blockading the city gates, and in a moment of blind panic, he snaps at his children, his fear speaking for him. This is a failure of Stoic composure, but here is where the progress happens. An hour later, his heart still pounding, he recognizes what he has done. He sits with his children. He apologizes for his harsh tone. He explains his fear, but also explains that his reaction was his own to manage. In that moment of reflection and repair, he is not a failed Stoic. He is a proficiens. He has taken a messy human moment and turned it into a lesson in accountability and courage for himself and his family. His progress is measured not by the absence of the outburst, but by his conscious return to his principles after it occurred. So think back over the last week. Can you identify one single, small instance where you began to practice this? Perhaps you felt a surge of anxiety about a news headline, but instead of spiraling, you took one deep breath and chose to focus on the task directly in front of you. That conscious breath, that tiny redirection of your attention, is a monumental step on the Stoic path. It is a triumph of the progressing soul. How does a Stoic grieve when death is everywhere? The answer is not found in a suppression of sorrow, but in its intelligent direction. Stoicism recognizes the pain of losing a loved one as a natural human response. It is the sting of a broken bond, and the philosophy does not demand you feel nothing. The critical distinction lies between allowing that natural sorrow and surrendering to a prolonged, destructive passion that shatters your capacity to live. The Stoic aim is to process the loss without being consumed by it, to honor the deceased by living well, not by joining them in a functional death. Seneca, in his Letters of Consolation, offers profound guidance to a grieving friend. He writes that we should not mourn because a life has been taken, but give thanks that it was given. He encourages us to cherish the good we have received and to accept the natural order of life, which includes its end. This is not a cold dismissal of emotion. It is a warm invitation to shift the focus from the bitterness of the ending to the gratitude for the story itself. Imagine two fathers who have each lost a son to the plague. One becomes trapped in a cycle of despair. He neglects his own health, abandons his duties to his remaining family, and lets his home fall into disarray. His grief, while real and understandable, has become a force of destruction that harms the living. The other father feels the same piercing loss. He allows himself to weep. But then he remembers his Stoic training. He chooses to honor his son's memory not through collapse but through action. He establishes a small fund to educate other children in his son's name, or he simply becomes more present and compassionate with his other children, ensuring they feel his love and protection. His grief is transformed into a purposeful force. It still hurts, but it does not paralyze. It motivates. Think back to a loss you have experienced. How might your journey through that grief have been different if you had consciously practiced this shift, focusing not only on the pain of the absence but with deep gratitude for the presence that once was? This is not about forgetting the pain, but about building a memorial to the person within your own character, ensuring that the love you shared continues to shape your actions in the world. Stoic resilience isn't built on one virtue alone, but on the seamless integration of all four. Think of them as four pillars supporting a single, unshakable inner structure. Wisdom is the first pillar, the clear-eyed understanding of what is truly happening and what can be done. It is the light that allows you to see the path. Courage is the second, the strength to walk that path even when it is frightening. Justice is the third, the commitment to ensure your steps benefit the whole community, not just yourself. And temperance is the fourth, the self-discipline that ensures you do not exhaust your strength halfway, that you have the endurance for the entire journey. They are not separate tools you pick up one at a time. They are interwoven threads in a single, strong rope. The Stoics taught that virtue is one, a unified state of excellent character. To possess one cardinal virtue truly, you must possess them all. You cannot have true courage without the wisdom to know what is worth enduring, nor can you practice justice without the temperance to control your own greed and fear. A community leader facing a plague must draw on this complete set. Their wisdom assesses the grim reality of the outbreak and identifies the most effective containment measures. Their courage allows them to announce those unpopular measures, facing public anger and their own anxiety. Their justice ensures that food and aid are distributed fairly, prioritizing the most vulnerable. And their temperance governs the entire effort, preventing a panicked overreaction that would waste precious resources and ensuring that the response is sustainable for the long, difficult weeks ahead. Each virtue supports and enables the others, creating a response that is both principled and powerfully effective. Now, bring this lens to your own life. Think of a significant decision you made recently, perhaps at work or within your family. Can you trace the presence of these four virtues in your reasoning? Was your action guided by clear understanding? Was it carried out with steadfastness? Was it fair to everyone involved, and was it measured and sustainable? Identifying which virtue was most present or curiously absent reveals the current architecture of your own inner citadel. In a crisis, what is your job? Stoicism says you have several, and they give your life direction. This is the core of Stoic role ethics, the idea that your identity is not a single thing, but a collection of vital parts you are cast to play. You are a parent, a child, a neighbor, a citizen, an employee. A plague does not erase these roles, it illuminates them, turning them into a clear blueprint for meaningful action when the world feels chaotic. The philosopher Epictetus urged his students to constantly remember who they are and what role you are playing. He pictured life as a great drama, authored by a divine playwright, and our task is simply to perform our assigned part well, whether it is a major role or a brief cameo. Your roles are not a limitation, they are your script. When you feel adrift in a sea of uncertainty, you can always look to your roles for your next line, your next action. This is the ultimate antidote to helplessness. It transforms a vague sense of anxiety into a list of concrete, manageable duties. Consider two people facing the same lockdown. One feels a general, free-floating dread, overwhelmed by news reports and the sheer scale of the problem. They pace their home, consumed by things they cannot change. The other person, guided by this Stoic practice, sits down and reflects on their roles. As a parent, their duty is to provide a sense of safety and routine for their children. That means reading a bedtime story and limiting fearful talk. As a neighbor, their duty is to support the community. That means calling the elderly person next door to check if they need groceries. As a citizen, their duty is to contribute to public health. That means following the recommended guidelines for hygiene and distancing. Their purpose is no longer abstract, it is etched into the very structure of their day. They are no longer a passive victim of events, but an active participant in their own life's drama. So, take a moment for a powerful exercise. Write down your 3 most important roles right now. Then, next to each one, write a single, concrete duty that role requires of you in this very week. This simple act can turn paralysis into purpose, giving you a map back to your own strength. What if an entire community thought like Stoics? History shows us glimpses of this possibility. When a critical mass of individuals begins to practice the virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, these personal disciplines begin to form a collective immune system. Societal resilience, then, is not merely the sum of many strong individuals, but the emergence of a new cultural normal where cooperation trumps panic and reason tempers fear. This is the Stoic ideal of the cosmopolis made tangible, a world community governed by mutual concern rather than narrow self-interest. Marcus Aurelius envisioned himself as a citizen of this great city, a single polity of gods and men, bound by shared reason. In such a community, the response to a plague would be instinctively coordinated. People would not need to be ordered to share resources or check on the vulnerable. It would arise naturally from a shared understanding of our interconnectedness. We see echoes of this in the historical records from ancient plagues, where some towns organized volunteer burial societies and established communal kitchens, actions guided by a sense of duty that transcended personal safety. This is the ultimate goal, to weave Stoic principles so deeply into the fabric of our culture that they become the default setting in a crisis. Imagine if our institutions, from schools to governments, explicitly taught and valued these frameworks. Education would equip young people not just with information, but with the emotional and ethical tools to face uncertainty with clarity. Leadership training would prioritize the Stoic virtues, creating leaders who see their role as servants of the common good, capable of making difficult, just decisions under immense pressure. A society educated in this way would not crumble when faced with a pandemic or a disaster. It would activate a pre-existing network of resilience, where everyone understands their role and acts from a place of principled calm. This cultural shift starts with a single conversation. Think of one Stoic principle that has resonated with you on this journey, perhaps the focus on what you can control or the commitment to compassionate action. How could you gently introduce that idea into a discussion with your family or a circle of friends this week? You are not lecturing, simply sharing a perspective that has offered you strength. Every time we do this, we are not just building our own inner citadel, we are laying a stone in the foundation of a more resilient world. The Stoics did not see a plague as a disaster to be survived, but as an opportunity to be seized. In their view, a crisis of this magnitude was the ultimate training ground, a furnace where ordinary character is forged into something unbreakable. This is the heart of the principle that the obstacle is the way. A peaceful, comfortable life offers few chances to practice true courage or profound self-discipline. It is only when our plans are shattered and our security is threatened that we discover what we are truly made of, and more importantly, what we can become. Marcus Aurelius captured this with his famous reminder, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." A plague, in all its horror, was not an interruption to a good life, it was the very material for building one. The disease itself was the impediment, but the response it demanded, the courage, the compassion, the clear thinking, that was the path forward. It forced a clarity that comfortable times never could. Consider a modern parallel, a business failure during an economic crisis. The common reaction is to see it as a pure catastrophe, a personal and professional defeat. The owner might be consumed by bitterness or despair, viewing the event as a wall that has ended their progress, but the Stoic reframe is entirely different. They would see this same failure as a brutal but necessary lesson. It becomes a chance to practice the virtue of resilience, to learn how to get back up. It forces the virtue of ingenuity, demanding new solutions and stripped-down efficiency. It even teaches temperance as you learn to distinguish between essential needs and past extravagances. The obstacle of the failure does not block the path. It reveals a new one, a path of character development that was always available but rarely so clearly signposted. So bring this lens to your own life for a moment. Identify one significant obstacle you are facing right now. It could be a strained relationship, a health concern, or a financial pressure. Now ask yourself this transformative question, not what if this had not happened, but what virtue is this situation inviting me to practice? Is it patience? Is it courage? Is it a more creative form of justice? Your greatest challenge is not your enemy, it is your most demanding and effective teacher. The plague could last for years. The Stoic antidote to future tripping is radical presence. While a mind lost in speculation about tomorrow's dangers is exhausted before the day has even begun, a mind anchored in the here and now conserves its strength for what is actually required. This is the core of Stoic mindfulness, a practice that aligns perfectly with the modern understanding of mindfulness, but with a distinctly practical, virtue-oriented aim. Marcus Aurelius offered himself this precise instruction in his Meditations, writing that you must confine yourself to the present moment and the current task. He was not advising a passive state of blank awareness, but an active, engaged focus on the duty directly before you. Your job is not to solve the entire pandemic in your mind, but to chop the vegetables for tonight's soup, to comfort the child who is frightened, to write the next line of the report. Each of these small, present actions is a brick laid in the foundation of a resilient life, while anxiety about the future is merely a storm that erodes the ground. Picture two individuals living through the same outbreak. One spends their days refreshing infection charts, their mind perpetually racing 6 months ahead into a landscape of imagined scarcity and loss. They are living in a story of suffering that has not yet happened and may never happen, draining their spirit with every fearful projection. The other person acknowledges the uncertainty, but then firmly brings their attention back. They focus on the sensation of warm water on their hands as they wash them thoroughly. They pour their full attention into a project they can complete today. They listen intently to a friend without mentally rehearsing their own worries. Their world is not smaller, it is more real, and within its boundaries, they find a profound sense of agency and peace. Let's try a brief exercise together right now. Wherever you are, just for the next minute, gently direct your attention to your breath. Do not try to change it, just notice the feeling of the air moving in and out of your body. Feel your chest rise and fall. If your mind wanders to a worry about tomorrow, which it inevitably will, that is perfectly fine. Without any judgment, simply guide your attention back to the next breath. This simple act of return is the essence of the practice. It is the mental muscle that allows you to step out of the terrifying movie of the future and back into the manageable reality of the present moment, where your true power has always resided. When the world seems to have gone mad, what if there is still a hidden, rational order? This is the profound trust the Stoics placed in the Logos, a divine reason woven through the entire cosmos. They saw the universe not as a random collection of chaotic events, but as a single, living, intelligent being, governed by a law as consistent and rational as the laws of mathematics. For a person living through a plague, this was not a naive optimism. It was a foundational belief that even the most devastating events were part of a coherent whole, a pattern too vast for our limited human minds to fully comprehend. The Stoic philosopher Cleans, in his beautiful hymn to Zeus, praises this very principle. He writes that nothing occurs on earth without you, God, except what bad men do in their own foolishness. This is not about a micromanaging deity causing suffering, but about a universal reason that provides the underlying structure for everything. The plague itself was a natural phenomenon, a part of that physical order, but the response of individuals, their fear or their courage, their hoarding or their sharing, that was where human reason, our own fragment of the Logos, could choose to align with the greater whole or rebel against it. This trust transforms your relationship with reality. Instead of railing against the universe for allowing a plague to happen, a Stoic seeks to understand its nature and their own role within it. They accept the event not with passive resignation, but with the active understanding that their task is to respond rationally, to play their part in the grand drama with virtue. Imagine a physician in ancient Alexandria, tirelessly studying the symptoms of the sick, trusting that the disease, however terrifying, operates by a set of natural, rational principles. They do not curse the illness as a senseless curse from the gods. They observe, they hypothesize, they test remedies. Their work is an act of faith in the Logos, a belief that the universe is orderly enough to be understood, even if that understanding remains just out of reach. Their peace comes not from finding a cure, but from knowing they are using their own reason to engage with a rational cosmos. Marcus Aurelius constantly returned to this idea in his private moments, reminding himself that all things are intertwined with one another. A sacred bond exists between them. From this perspective, even a plague was not an isolated evil, but a thread connected to the health of the ecosystem, the movement of trade, and the ultimate cycle of life and death. This trust in a rational universe dissolves the exhausting urge to fight reality itself. So, bring this to your own life for a moment. Think of a recent event that felt confusing, unfair, or chaotic. Can you entertain the possibility, just for a moment, that it might be part of a larger pattern you cannot yet see? What would change if you trusted that your own capacity for reason is your most reliable tool for navigating it, and that your primary task is not to question why it happened, but to determine how you can respond with integrity and wisdom? A plague shatters supply chains. The Stoics had been preparing for this by practicing voluntary simplicity. This is not about a life of grim deprivation, but about a strategic reduction of dependencies. When your happiness and security are tied to a fragile network of imports and just-in-time deliveries, any disruption can feel like a personal catastrophe. The Stoic approach is to intentionally pare down your wants, to distinguish sharply between what is truly necessary for a virtuous life and what is merely a comfortable extra. By minimizing your needs, you maximize your freedom and your capacity to endure when those complex systems falter. The philosopher Musonius Rufus, a teacher of Epictetus, was a powerful advocate for this way of life. He argued that hard work and simple food were not punishments, but tools for building a strong and independent character. He asked his students why they would outsource the growing of their own food, suggesting that working the land oneself was a noble and healthful pursuit. This was not a rejection of commerce, but a cultivation of inner resources. It is the difference between being a passenger on a ship, terrified when the storm hits, and being someone who knows how to swim. The person who has practiced simplicity has a reserve of skills and a mindset of adaptability that no market crash can take away. Picture two households when a quarantine is announced. One family's kitchen is stocked with gourmet ingredients and ready-made meals from distant places. Their comfort is entirely dependent on a steady flow of goods from outside. When that flow stops, their anxiety skyrockets. They are victims of a circumstance they never prepared for. The other family, guided by this Stoic value, has a simpler pantry. They have basic staples and perhaps a small garden with herbs and vegetables. They know how to cook from scratch and repair things themselves. Their peace of mind does not vanish with the delivery trucks. Their resilience is built in, and this self-sufficiency often extends outward, allowing them to share their surplus with a struggling neighbor. Their simplicity becomes a source of community strength. So take a moment for a practical inventory. What are 3 things you currently consider a need that you could realistically reduce or even eliminate? It might be that daily takeout coffee, the constant stream of new clothing, or the reliance on a single complex piece of technology for your entertainment. This is not about judging your lifestyle, but about consciously choosing where to build your own foundations a little stronger, a little closer to home. When this is all over, what will remain of you? In the stark reality of a plague, Stoicism offers a final, profound consolation. Our material possessions, our social status, and even our physical bodies are temporary, subject to the same decay that surrounds us. The only thing that truly endures is the legacy of our character, the imprint of our virtues on the lives of others. This is our lasting contribution to a world that will continue long after we are gone. Marcus Aurelius returned to this thought again and again in his private writings, wrestling with the fleeting nature of all things. He reminds himself how quickly all of us are forgotten, the endless procession of those who lived full lives and then vanished. The memory of a lavish banquet or a great fortune fades almost instantly, but a life lived with integrity, courage, and compassion, he observed, leaves a different kind of trace. It is not a monument of stone, but a pattern of goodness woven into the fabric of the community, a pattern that can guide others long after your name is no longer spoken. This is the ultimate shift in perspective, from clinging to what we have to cultivating what we can give. Consider the story of an ordinary baker during a past outbreak. His shop was forced to close, his own livelihood in jeopardy. Yet he used his remaining flour not to hoard for an uncertain future, but to organize a simple community kitchen. He enlisted his neighbors to help distribute loaves to those who were sick or isolated. He did not save his business, and his name is lost to history. But the legacy of his action was the strengthened web of trust and mutual aid he helped create in his neighborhood. That network of care became the true inheritance for those who survived, a living monument more durable than any tombstone. His material possessions were temporary, but the impact of his virtuous choice rippled forward in time. So take a quiet moment this week to write down one single action you could take. It does not need to be grand. It could be a commitment to listen more patiently to a family member, to offer specific help to a colleague, or to volunteer a single hour for a local cause. What small, deliberate step could you take to ensure that your legacy, however modest, is one of positive contribution? The journey from a single mind guarding its inner citadel to an entire society standing firm is the ultimate promise of Stoic philosophy. We began with a lone emperor, Marcus Aurelius, finding strength in the midst of a plague by focusing only on what was within his power, his own judgment and character. We saw how that personal discipline, when multiplied across a community, becomes the foundation for shared resilience, for fair distribution of aid, and for courageous action in the face of collective fear. This is not a philosophy of retreat, but of profound engagement. It provides a robust and timeless framework for navigating any crisis, not with a guarantee of safety, but with the unshakable tools of wisdom, courage, and compassion. Marcus Aurelius leaves us with a final, unifying thought that binds the personal to the communal. He wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." This is the full expression of the Stoic path, to embrace your circumstances not with resignation, but with active love for the human community you are a part of. Your fate and your duty are woven together. So now, as this story of ancient plagues and timeless wisdom concludes, the most important question arrives. How will you carry these lessons forward? What single insight from this journey will you take into your own modern life, into your family, your work, and your neighborhood? Share one thought in the comments below, and let's continue building this resilient community together, one mindful action at a time.